I'm just going to spend the next 20 minutes or so, probably even less, talking about ITOM, as it says there. My name's Derek Byrne, as you can also see there. I have literally been at Highmetric for 23 days, so I am not a ServiceNow expert yet, but I have been doing ITOM for nearly 20 odd years, before it was even called ITOM. I've been on the other side of the fence where I was the operator, trying to understand what was in the environment, trying to understand the health of the stuff in my environment, and then I've worked for various vendors over the years on this side of the fence, trying to help companies implement ITOM. So what I thought I would do is walk you through the key steps of ITOM, what to look out for, the typical things that will trip you up. I'm obviously going to focus on the ServiceNow technology, the bits I know of it. But if you see something on the screen and you want to ask some questions, please do. I will answer them if I can. If I don't know the answer, I will take it away and come back to you. Okay? So, you've all seen this, or variations of it, the big circle, the Death Star screen, and all that kind of stuff. This is the bit I'm going to focus on here, the ITOM. And I'm going to touch on SAM if we have a bit of time, because they are pretty well linked into each other, right? But this is kind of the journey I'm going to take you through. So every single successful implementation of IT operations management that I've ever done has followed this kind of focus. So we figure out first of all what's in the environment, it's that visibility piece. And that's everything from the server estate, now the cloud estate as well, AWS, Azure, those sort of things, and the end user estate. So whether those are laptops, those weird Macs that they're all using in the rest of the company, which I don't like, he looked, or phones, whatever it is, okay? Once we understand what's in the environment, it's a case of, well, what is that thing doing? So we start off with well, what's it connected to? You know, this server is talking to this switch, you know, the really basic things. But then looking a little step further to say, well, what does that thing actually do for us as an organization? So what business service is that server part of, okay? So we'll look at the health of those, do a little bit of monitoring in there as well. So if something does go down, you know, rather than just saying, hey, we've got a service that stopped, you know, it's a service on a server or a hard drive's filled up, what does that actually mean to the business? Is that going to take down our HR system? Is it going to take down a web portal for our customers? What's it going to do? And then if we've got time, we're going to go into optimization. So what can we do with that thing better? So, you know, could we utilize it better? Could we add more capacity to it? I'm going to focus a little bit on license management as well. So actually, we've got 100 of those. Do we actually need 100 of them? Could we do with 50 or do we need more? Okay, so that's kind of what I'm going to go through. And I'm going a little bit fast, so if I'm going too fast, stop me. Right, let's jump into some product. Okay, so you probably know this stuff better than I do in terms of the way the platform works. But what I'm going to take you through is the typical kind of thing. So let's start off with discovery. So there's a couple of ways that we can do discovery. Obviously, ServiceNow has its own discovery piece. So I'll pull up the dashboard. I don't have a ton of data in my dashboard at the moment, but I just want to pull it up to give you the kind of the sense of we can. Has anyone actually seen discovery within ServiceNow before? Is this completely new? Yeah, some demos. Yeah. Have you got any other discovery tools? Any other sources of data? Lots and lots? Brilliant, that's music to my ears. Okay, so what this is focusing on, this screen here, is purely what's going on with the ServiceNow discovery. But one of the things that we can do is we can link it into lots of other sources. So SCCM, anyone get SCCM? Yeah? So, no? Some, yeah? Yeah. SCCM is a brilliant source of data for us. Gives us all sorts of end user data. It's particularly useful when we start looking at license management later. So if you've got the agent installed, you can start to do software license metering. And we can feed that data into here, and then we can start to do some really cool stuff about what's your licensing situation? Could we reclaim it off somebody? Could we give it to somebody else? All that kind of cool stuff. In my experience, the biggest thing though with any discovery tool, irrespective of whether it's ServiceNow or any of the others I've ever worked with, the one thing that holds up all projects is credentials. Any decent discovery tool that's looking at the server estate and cloud estate will be agentless. SCCM needs to be agent-based because you need to be able to monitor what's going on this laptop, right? But with your data centers and your cloud, it needs to be agentless. For that to happen, it has to have credentials. And every single project I've ever worked on, they delayed because we don't get the credentials we want in time, right? Always happens. Irrespective of how many times in a session like this I mention it, it's always going to happen. So be prepared. But within the ServiceNow platform, we're looking at all sorts of different credentials. So everything from Windows credentials to talk to Windows servers. Look for SSH credentials to talk to Linux boxes, and we may need some extra privileged commands to be added to the sudos file, things like that. AWS, there's various credentials we'll need there. Lots and lots. SNMP, read-only, all sorts of things. But what I would recommend is whenever you're embarking on an ITOM project is start talking to whoever holds the keys now. Get us to talk to them as well. We'll start to help you sort of like sell that project internally, why it's important to you, but why it's going to be important to them as well. What are they going to get out of it? And what I find is if the security people are on board, or whoever it is who owns the credentials is on board and they're going to get some value out of this project, they're much more likely to go, not a problem, there's your credential. If you bring them in when we're on site actually doing the implementation and you go, oh, we need credentials to all of your Windows servers, then we might as well leave site because they're going to tell us to jump over that balcony there, right? It's not going to happen. So that's one of the biggest things I find that trips people up. So please don't underestimate that. Right? And I will keep on mentioning it because it's huge. The other thing really simply is IP ranges. So we need to know the IP ranges of your environment. Or if it's cloud, obviously we don't need to know that. We just need to know the subscriptions, so whether you're using AWS or Azure. But if you don't know the IP ranges, again, let's get in with the people who will know that in infrastructure. Sell them on the value this project's going to bring to them as well as to you. Right? But once we've actually done that, we've got the IP ranges, we've got the credentials, it goes out on a schedule and starts to discover what's in your environment. The way it does that, the newer way of doing it is based on patterns. And patterns are basically just ways of saying, if you see a particular process running on a machine, or if you see some other type of signature that triggers your pattern, this is how to discover that machine. So here are the scripts to run, here are the commands to run, here are the files to go and read, and they're all based on different types of technology. So let's say, for instance, you had some F5 load balancers. Put in F5, and I've got a bunch of patterns related to F5 load balancers. Now, environments change, vendors bring out new kits, new vendors come on the market. So this pattern library has constantly been updated with content packs. So it's something that ServiceNow will constantly just keep on doing. They'll take feedback from us, they'll take feedback from you, and they'll do their own research into the market to see what's going on. But this is kind of the secret sauce. This is how it sort of intelligently works out what's actually in the environment. So when it sees a server, how to interrogate the fact that it's a Windows box or a Linux box, or if it's physical or virtual, what actually is it? And how to figure out what it's talking to. So is it as simple as a netstat that we need to run, or is there a particular other command that we should run to figure out what it's talking to? Okay. The results, well, everyone got a CMDB? Everyone using CMDB? Yeah, cool. So the results, as you would imagine, get pumped into the CMDB, various different CIs in there. The patterns, again, will tell it which CI types to be using. So it's all done. You've all seen this screen before? Most of you. I don't need to go into that in too much detail. The one thing I would say is look at things like orphans. So look at orphan machines, so machines you didn't know were even there, because that then starts to add value in other areas, such as security. Because you may be using a security tool like, I don't know, Nessus, Rapid7, Qualys, any of those sort of vulnerability scanners. They're only as good as the areas you point them to. So if you point them in this part of the environment and there's a bunch of servers over here that they don't know about, they can't tell you that they're vulnerable. This can start to help you with that. Okay. And also things like orphan relationships. So 2 weeks ago, we saw that this device, let's say it's a load balancer, was talking to this web server or something. They're no longer talking. Well, why is that? Did somebody do something they shouldn't have done? Is there a change that happened and there's no change record for it? Starts to highly, you've ever come across that? But we're starting to find those little weird things that are happening that we don't know about, right? This will start to help you with that dashboard to start looking for orphan devices, orphan relationships. Right? Ultimately, you want a list of stuff, you know, CIs, whatever you want to call them. Right? I'm just going to click on my first one. We did it for time, good. So, is that coming up? There we go. Instantly, I've got a couple of red flags with this record. And the fact that a lot of the fields haven't been filled in. So I don't know much about the operating system apart from the fact that it's Red Hat. I don't know much about the disks, the memory that's on there, things like that. Now, in this case, it's because this is something I've manually added in here, just to give you an example. But the idea being that if I've got lots of things that are missing, that'll start to flag up in my CMDB health window to say it's incomplete, but also it could be that I've got bad credentials. So it's particularly useful when I'm looking at Windows machines. If I don't have a high enough credential, I won't get all the data I want. And that, for me, is a typical example of a machine that doesn't have the right credentials. That's a red flag. But the bit I wanted to show you here, what's a nice breeze coming in there, is these relationships here. So when it went and scanned a machine, it started to run, again, NetStats is a really good way of doing it, but it started to figure out what this is talking to, what its relationships are. So I could see in a little view like that, or I can come in here and see more of a dependency map. And if I go and expand this one, oops, come on, there we go. Why is that not working? There we go. My fat finger's on the keyboard. It starts to show me how this particular thing I started with links into everything else. And we can zoom into it and see what those things are. Now, some customers will stop at this point. They won't go any further in the journey. Because at this point, what you've got is configuration management. And the fact that I know what's in my environment, I know how it's configured, so I know the memory, well, not on that particular machine I don't, but I know the memory, the hard drive, the operating system, all that kind of stuff, and I know what it's connected to. I have no service context at this point whatsoever, so I don't know what this thing does in my environment, but if all I want to do is basic config management, I've just achieved it, okay? So some customers will stop there, or some of this will be phase one, and then we'll go on to phase 2, 3, etc. So that's the kind of visibility view that I talked about at the beginning. The next bit is health. So let's come out of there. Let's pull up my dashboard here. So what I'm talking about here is what's the health of my business services. The one thing we haven't done yet is actually define a business service. All we've done is said that this particular thing here talks to this thing over here. Put no context on it. So there's a thing within here, and most of the competing products will have some level of service mapping. The way we do it in here, in fact, let me just pull this up. Just pull this up so I'll give you a visual as well as while I'm talking. So for my electronic messaging service, I'll pull it up here, zoom in a little bit. You'll see that? And here I can see all of the components that make up that service. The way we've done that is use service mapping within ServiceNow. That's a mouthful to say. The way we start with that is we have an entry point, typically a URL or a load balancer or something that says this is my starting point, and then it works its way down all the communications to figure out what that service looks like. Not something I'm going to demo building one right now because I haven't got time, because I've literally got 5 minutes before you all need to go on to the next session. But once we've built this, we can then start to do some service health. So we can say, great, actually, who's got monitoring tools here? Any monitoring tools? What sort of stuff have you got? So what I find is most organizations will have a whole host of different monitoring tools because they've grown through acquisitions over the years. For us, that's fine. You know, we're okay with that. You know, some vendors will say, no, you've got to rip them all out and put our one tool in. We're happy to use whatever tools you've got. I've got a slide here that gives you a sample of the types of tools that we do support. So that comes up. There's a whole host in there. These are the ones we support out of the box. If it's not on there, it's quite straightforward to build an integration to whatever monitoring tool you've got. But essentially, all of these tools will say, hey, a particular service on that server has gone down, the hard drive is full up, we can't communicate with the server at all, whatever the alert is. But what you normally get in most environments, if that's all you do, is you get these event storms. So you've got this poor operator looking at a screen, and it's got red, 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 orange, orange, red, 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 and a couple of greens at the bottom. But they look at the red, and it just says server 1 has a problem, or an issue, as an event. Server 3 has an event. That tells you nothing, does it? Because your poor operator then has to look at that and go, well, what does that server actually do? And they have to then use either the knowledge they've got in their head or go and talk to other people. It gives them nothing. So if we can put a service layer on that, which is what we're doing here, we can then tell you the health of the actual the service itself. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trigger an outage on one of my services here. I'm going to run a script that just, because I haven't got a server sat next to me, I can't turn it off. So I'm going to falsify an event here. It's going to generate this script. That's running in the background. And then what you'll see on here in a couple of seconds is this will start going orange and red because a whole bunch of stuff's going to break. Right? Without that service map, I couldn't do that. All I would get is a list of alerts in my monitoring tool to say server 1 has an issue, server 2 has an issue. Does that make sense? Does you see the value of that, right? Wait for that to come up. And we're running out of time a little bit, so I'm just going to jump ahead a bit. But once those start going red and orange, your operator then looks at that and goes, oh no, I've got an issue with my electronic messaging system or my customer email or whatever it is. They'll then double click on that. They'll be able to see what the actual event was. Come on. That's not going to... You know, I've tested this like 20 times, that generation, and every single time, hey, it's worked. There you go. It's just triggered. So now that's gone. It's gone down. It's letting me know, hey, there's an issue with my electronic messaging system. I can double click on that. And they give me more details about what the actual issue was. The event was, not issue, sorry. And I'm just going to zoom in on that a little bit. And I can see a number of areas there where it's highlighting that something's gone wrong. That's the data that's come in from my event monitoring tool, okay? And then, for instance, I could come over to my Apache machine here, and I've got some Meridian. I can never say that word. You know, you can read it, you know what it says. I can go fix it automatically, right? And if I want to see a bit of detail about the actual issue itself, I can click on that there, and down here it will tell me the fact that port 02 was not responding to traffic, okay? If I want to go and fix it, remediation, that's the word. I can click on my options, and these are some scripted actions that I've pre-built into my system, but this is up to you what those are going to be, depending on what the original event was. Sometimes it'd be a reboot, a restart of a service, send an email to somebody to go do something first, and if I just go and restart the service, run that, and I've got the workflow that actually is behind that automatic action. And if I just go refresh that, you'll see it go through the various different actions it needs to go through. This flow here is going to be custom for every single customer, you know, because you're going to want to do things different to somebody else. But this is a basic little workflow that just goes and restarts a server for me. It's completed.
So may I have a question? And here the term restart service is used in the context of restarting particular CI action.
Yes.
Right?
And it's the affected CI.
CI.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so it would be a service that's running on a CI, or it could be a reboot 4 servers in one go.
Which means effectively 4 CIs.
That's it. Yeah, because there could be a sequence.
Are you talking about server?
No, there was an option restart service.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think Derek is talking about the services that you run on servers.
Yeah.
So
That's it. Yeah. Not the whole service. But it could be sometimes to get this server running, you've got to reboot these 3 in sequence, and you've got to reboot sort of like, you know, a DHCP service over there, DNS over there, script it, and you'll see it's now come back up. It's all working. I'm really conscious of time. It's now like 10 minutes before the keynote's about to start, and I've got people over there looking at me because I've got a cut. But just to summarize what we've covered there, I won't get time to do the SAM piece at the end, but what we've covered is the basic discovery, and if you do that, you'll be able to do some basic configuration management in terms of what's in my environment and what's it connected to, how's it configured. If you go the next level, which is then to start to do some service mapping, you can then link that into things we haven't even talked about, such as change management. So when you're doing your changes, you can actually see what the service looks like, what a particular component is doing. We've talked about how it can link into security by looking for orphan servers, orphan relationships, and then linking that into service health when we've got the service map to say, look, I'm not going to get an event storm now that tells me lots of things have gone down. I'm going to see what the business service is that's gone down and take it from that approach. And I'm done.